Hey, so I wanted to talk to you guys about this sort of richer coloring style that I've been playing with a little bit lately because I know a lot of you guys are probably like I was when even not that long ago, even within a year or two ago, I would look at certain colors like in this example here, just going to zoom up here for a second, and I would look at really rich colors like this that has a big hue range. If we get in close here, I actually went ahead and kind of drew an example over here, but there's these yellows and there's the kind of the base peachy colors and these warm almost purples getting into some reflected light that's kind of pale. And but I would look at this as someone trying to learn coloring styles and learn how people are able to put together schemes like this. And sometimes I would just scratch my head. So in this video, I want to talk to you guys how I'm using layers to arrive at this effect without having to get too bogged down in the color theory stuff. And so yeah, roll the fancy new intro. All right, welcome everyone. My name is K. Michael Russell. I am a comic book colorist and the instructor at o1artschool.com. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So this image came from Celor, who is the artist on Hack/Slash Resurrection. Flew out of my head there for a second. And he posted this on Instagram, and I thought it was awesome, and I wanted to color it. So he sent it over, and it just did it for fun. And one thing I realized kind of while I was working on it, because I wanted this to be it was kind of an experiment, really, really painty, very, very lush, very rich colors. So anyway, as I was working on this, I realized that this would be an excellent example to give you guys a different way of thinking about these sort of colors. Because if you're like me, I spent a lot of years sort of confused over, thinking, well, maybe he used a purple brush and then he switched to a red, and how did he smooth this out without blending? Some of you guys are having these same thoughts. I know, I was there. What if there was a different way? Now, I'm not going to say better way, just different way, maybe a little bit easier way, because you want to start one of those firestorm arguments on Twitter among colorists. Number one, ask them which is better, RGB or CMYK. You get a great little fire going with that one. Power your whole house with it. And spoiler alert, it doesn't matter. But the other thing is number of layers, okay? Because you will see some colorists that use a jillion of them, okay? Like, I'm using more than I used to, but I'm nowhere near what some of my friends use. And then you've got others, usually more experienced, we'll put it that way, that work on, a couple layers. And they're fantastic at it. And both ways work. So yeah, I don't want the comments to become like layer count wars about which one's better. But I want to give you guys a different way of maybe thinking about this. And basically, quickly, to kind of recap, we've got flat colors, shadows, separate layer. We've got highlights. We have what I've labeled indirect light over here on the layers, but just all of the light that is not direct light, basically. We've got some warmth from the subsurface scattering, which is a great term, and something called ambient occlusion. And then there's also some polish on top of this also. But it's much different to think about this being done in multiple layers. And what I found is, even if when I look at other artwork, even if the artists themselves used one layer or 10 layers or whatever it was, I've started to recognize these different kind of components. And this is a very formulaic way of working. And so again, there's going to be some people that are like, oh, you're not an art purist. You got to be on one layer like a man and, color with pigments made of your own blood. That's it. That's the only way. Yeah, I don't agree with that. But use whatever works for you. So anyway, so let's go through this a little bit slower for those of you that have an attention span. And just so I don't blind you guys, I'm putting this artwork behind this background here because that white is harsh to look at. All right, so number one is the easy part, which is stay inside the lines, okay? That's flatting. Everything's one color. This piece actually has a few little washes in it. If you get really close, you can see just some little ink washes and stuff in there. It's pretty subtle, but I did use that as, you know, a guideline for what I was doing. So that part's easy. All right, so that's flats. We know flats. So now we've got shadows. And, you know, nothing groundbreaking here. These are just, it's all one color, and it's all in multiply mode. And if you look at them by themselves, you can see, whoops, that it's all one color. Okay, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time picking colors here. It's all one color. And the other thing that I want to bring up about shadows, actually it's kind of a separate little bullet point here, are the transitions. Because this is something that is really important. I've done videos before. One of my how not to color videos was on hard and soft transitions, which are basically the edges of your lights and shadows. So if we go back and look at these shadows by themselves, you can see that there are places where the edges are harder, you know, where the light's not, you know, it's like a hard edge, and so it's throwing a hard shadow. And then there are places where it sort of, you know, blends a little bit more, especially on like her arm. You know, it's a big curved surface, so you're not going to get, you know, usually hard edges on something like that. But that's important to make your art look interesting, just because if all of your shadows are the exact softness or the exact same hardness, it just, I mean, sometimes it can work, you know, for like, you know, anime styles or manga, you know, whatever, like cartoony type rendering styles where it's very flat. That totally works. But when you're trying to do something like what I was doing, which is much more painterly and a little bit richer, you know, you're not going to have like all one edge on all of your lighting. So understanding when to use hard edges and when to use soft edges is very important. And it basically comes down to if the surfaces have hard edges or if they're curved. Next step is direct light and highlights. Okay, so basically I stayed away from the shadow areas, and in all the areas that were left over and facing the light, which in this case is coming from the top, and that was kind of established in the line art. I didn't have to make that decision. If you look at the shadows, the light's from the top. So don't fight the art when it comes to that. Make sure your colors match the light there. But if you look at the direct light closely, you'll see that everything on her skin is all one color. It's all that kind of reddish orange color. And then in her hair, I threw around some, and in her clothes, there's some like tealish colors in here, just because I wanted those to be cooler lights. But same principles apply. You know, there are places where this is a little bit of a harder edge. There's place where it's a softer edge, and even with this, with just this layer by itself. Now this layer was in what's it called? Add mode or direct linear dodge. Is that what it is? I think so. I'm checking. Yeah, linear dodge. And even with it, if I turn off, see, it turned off the shadows. You know, you get some bright yellows, you get some oranges, and you get your base color. Like, you get a pretty decent mix of colors all in that one layer mode. I keep the brushes very low opacity. That's kind of the trick, because that layer will get out of hand. That layer mode will get really crazy, blown out, like overexposed and all that. So you don't want to mess around with that. All right, so next we have indirect light. All right, so if you look, you can see this under her arm here, a little bit under this arm, but it's basically that plane of her arm that's facing down, you know, is just, and this is only in the shadows. It's not going to creep into the direct light because that stuff's too bright. So yeah, basically in the shadow areas, you can see a couple places where there's like a very, very soft whitish blue light coming behind her. And honestly, I just picked that color because it's opposite orange, so I thought it would look cool. Then we have subsurface scattering, which is like my favorite color theory term or art term or lighting term because it sounds so technical. But it's basically, if I flip this off and on, you guys can see that it's adding mostly red. Okay, if you look at that layer just by itself, it's like a deep, I get really close, you can see it's kind of a deep reddish, leaning toward purple a little bit, which in this kind of lighting scenario made sense. But you notice how much that it warms up the skin. So that's with it off, and that's with it on. You know, and that usually happens again in those transitions between light and shadow, where the light is catching blood. Honestly, it's catching the blood in the skin, so it's going into the skin and then coming out warmer. And it's called scattering because when the light hits the skin, it scatters in all these different directions. I think that's why it's called that. Some scientist is going to correct me. Actually, the scattering is called, I don't know. That's what it's called. I don't know why. And so anyway, it's mostly in those transition areas. It's not really overlapping the bright areas. It's getting a little bit into the shadows, but it's kind of in that middle area. That's kind of where that stuff lives. And then the last one is, well, almost the last one, is ambient occlusion, which is it's one of those things kind of hard to explain. But if you'll look, you'll notice it in all of the areas where things are meeting together. Edges and corners and little nooks and crannies and all these different places. So yeah, like under her arm is a perfect example. So like light comes in and it kind of bounces around, and it bounces off of things repeatedly. It's bouncing all over the place all the time. But the thing is, every time that light bounces, it gets weaker. Okay, so it might come in like boom, and then it bounces and it's a lot weaker, and then it bounces again and it's even weaker, and it bounces again and it's even weaker, and you can barely see it until it doesn't even make it into the corners. Like it might as well not be there. And so that's why, under the sockets of eyes and under necks, and a lot of times you'll notice that those areas tend to look more saturated because every time the light bounces, it catches more of the color of what it's bouncing off of. This gets probably too technical for this video, but yeah, so it's picking up more orangey colors every time it goes, so it keeps getting more. My cat has joined us. He's going to scratch the floor now. Are you done? He's not in a talkative mood today. So anyway, that's ambient occlusion though. It's all the places where, put your fingers together and look at the line in between, and you're going to see it's a little darker there, just because the light is not able to make it into those little cracks there. And then the last layer is polish, is what I've called it. And there was a few color holds also. So basically, I just warmed up the color of her skin in places in the inks. So if you look at this by itself, can't really see it again. Well, against the background, you probably can. There you go. So you can see that there's some places where her skin is a little bit warmer, just more orangey on the sides, facing the light. And I also tossed in a note at the bottom, just surface differences. And what I mean by that is like the texture of surfaces. You don't see much things like subsurface scattering, for example, other than skin, or things that are translucent, basically, anything that's translucent. So things like clothing, not this kind of material, like you don't see that as much, or at all, probably on most things. And so you'll notice that we don't have equal amounts of contrast everywhere. There's much more contrast on our skin because skin's more reflective. But like like my Iron Man shirt that I'm wearing here, there's very little difference in the darkest parts of this and the brightest. There's not a lot of contrast there. Same thing here. A little bit of brightness on top, but it's not that reflective. It's not reflective like skin, so I'm not going into all that detail in the rendering. Hopefully that makes sense. But what got me to thinking about kind of lighting in this kind of formulaic way like this is that I was going through and I was labeling this PSD file, making sure all the layers are really clearly named because it's going to be on my Patreon next month. Check it out. Subtle plug. And it made me realize that this is like the order that I learned to color in, almost exactly. It's like with every step that I learned something new, I would throw a new layer on top. I didn't always do it on top. Sometimes I would do it all in one layer. Even this would totally work on one layer if you wanted to. But I wanted that editability later, because if all of a sudden I realized that, man, I wish that the light from the top was a different color, then I can just go to that layer, open up hue saturation, and change the color, and get all sorts of different looks from this. And so imagine being able to do this at every level, at every layer. So even if you don't pick the exact right color the first time, change it after the fact. You know, throw in your shadows like you want, add your color later. You know, so if you have a hard time, one of the things I know people have problems with is picking the right colors. There are not a lot of colors being used here. You know, the shadows are all one color basically. The light is one color. The indirect light's one. The subsurface scattering is one, and the ambient occlusion is another, but it's technically just a gray color almost. So I only chose 3 or 4 colors for the entire image. It doesn't look that way. The final result doesn't look that way because of the way these things layer together and the way that they mix. You know, if you kind of do them in the right order and you kind of set up rules for yourself on some of these things, because, you know, your indirect light's not going to seep into the direct light, and, you know, you're not going to see, you know, a bounce light in the brightest part of an image or anything like that. You know what I mean? You're not going to see a shadow, you know, crossing into where the direct light is. You know, there's different, I don't want to say rules because there's not really rules in art, but there are some guidelines that you can use to make this work together. So as I was looking at this list of concepts, which looked an awful lot like a curriculum to me on light and shadow, and I kind of realized that I haven't really done a course or a set of lessons on the really specific aspects of rendering, because I know some of you guys are watching this and you're saying, well, this is all great, the layers and stuff, I can figure that out, that's easy, but like, how do you know where the light goes? And it's something that I've kind of, I don't want to say that I've like intentionally avoided covering, because there is a lot involved. But to give you guys a quick example, like just say on her arm, for example, no matter what you're drawing, and I really do mean no matter what, you can almost always find a basic shape equivalent. You know, there's a reason why you look up shading and lighting tutorials. They start off with spheres and cubes and cylinders, right? Like they almost all do. And the reason for that is you can break down almost any part of anything, whether it's a person or objects or whatever, into basic shapes. And so, for example, now I'm not actively thinking through every step that I'm about to tell you, like consciously, okay? I've been doing this so long, you know, I've been drawing since I was born, basically. I don't remember starting. My mom said I was 3 or 4 years old. But a lot of the things that I think I sort of assumed that a lot of people got, I'm learning more and more from people. It's like, you know what, I need this explained a little bit. And so what I mean here is, and let's see, can you guys see that? Yeah. So what is this object here? It's a big old cylinder, okay? Cylinders have round edges, and so when the light's coming from the top like this, you end up with kind of a soft transition through here. There's no super hard edge, you know, unless she was like a bodybuilder or something and had like a, you know, really hard muscle there that was, you know, creating a crease or something. But the way it is now, there's not. Now you can see that I did do a little bit of that on her bicep, because we've got a different shape here. But even within that shape, you know, you can think of this as kind of like a squashed sphere. So you've got your little highlight there in the middle, and you've got it going on down to the end, and then you've got your reflected light at the bottom, and there you go. So it's 2 big cylinders, you know. Looking at faces, you know, this is pretty much a flat plane, you know, and then like if you're looking at faces, you have to look at it in 3 dimensions. So what I like to do sometimes is kind of, you know, in the lessons I do this, is I'll draw like a wireframe almost of, you know, and I'm exaggerating this like it's more from the side just so you guys can see it better. But it wouldn't actually be at this angle, but it's showing me, all right, where I'm going in, there's a shadow because that plane's facing down. There's a shadow under the nose. There's a shadow under here. These areas are catching light because they're facing up. You know, like that's the level of detail that I'm thinking about as I'm rendering. It just all happens really fast. And so that comes with time and practice. You know, you're not going to overnight become an expert renderer. But I've put this whole video together to tell you guys about Light and Shadow Made Easy. It's my new course. I'm very excited about this one. And there's a promo video that I will let you guys watch. I won't play it here just to save some time. But there's like a 2-minute video that kind of explains what all's going on there. You can look at the full curriculum, which you will recognize a lot of the things we just talked about, except there's more detail here, obviously. So we've got direct light, we've got transitions, did a brief lesson on choosing colors, making that a little bit simpler. I was trying to not bog this down too much in color theory because you can get away with not knowing all of it. Okay, like there's I feel like you could probably take a 4-year degree in color theory and not learn it all. And but there's plenty of digital tricks and things you can do that'll save you some time. If you're not an expert, it definitely makes it easier. And there's examples. I actually use quite a bit of examples from movies. You know, there's lots of Infinity War stills in here for educational purposes, of course, and because the lighting is so good in that movie and all those Marvel movies. But there were all these great examples of dramatic lighting, so I ended up using that quite a bit. There is a big section on the indirect light and ambient occlusion and the Fresnel effect. This is the only one you guys have probably seen. I realized that my YouTube video on this did about as good of a job as I could do explaining it. So, you know, bonus lesson if you haven't seen that video. But the rest of this stuff's all new. All new. And then there's an exercise at the end in 3 different parts where we actually go through all of this together in a real world, you know, scenario, a real comic book scenario. And then a bonus punchy lesson that was kind of funny. I wanted to, I had this piece that I wanted to use for, you know, promo. Actually the final exercise. I was like, well, I'll use this in the promos. But I was looking at it and I was like, it's a little bit flat. I need to punch it up some, you know, more contrast, more pop. You guys know I love that term. And then I realized, well, if I do that, that's not fair to punch up the thing afterwards. So I made another lesson showing you guys how I did the punchy stuff. So check it out. Right now I am running it 50% off and it's only $39 to begin with. So it's less than 20 bucks. $19.50 if I'm doing my math right. So yeah, it's not a very expensive course. It's about 3 hours long, give or take. And but I hope you guys will check it out. I've had a lot of fun making it, and it really forced me to think about things that I sort of took for granted, you know. And I really tried to break down why I do what I do and how I do it, you know. And it's probably the most technical course that I've done as far as just some of the nuts and bolts. There's quite a bit you have to kind of dig through, but the overall concepts are very simple, I think. And I think that a lot of people will have a lot of those, hopefully have a lot of those light bulb moments, you know, where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it now. But yeah, this is just, I really wanted to put this together over the last couple of months, and the shoulder threw me out for a little while, of course. But I've learned so much myself over the last year or two, just in my own studies, and I wanted to pass that along to you guys. So, oh yeah, there's actually 2 ways to pick this one up. You can go to my website there I showed you guys earlier and sign up there. One thing that I didn't mention earlier is if you get it from there, all the videos are downloadable, so you can just download them. You don't have to stream them. You can take it with you on your phone or your tablet or whatever kids are using these days. I don't even know. So you can take them with you. You don't have to be online for it. And you also get access to me, okay? So if you have questions, if you have concerns, you find yourself stuck, or if that's what you're worried about, you're like, well, I want to look into this, but you know, what if I can't figure it out? You know, there's a discussion board. It's exclusive to students in that course. And you can post questions and get answers, and so that's kind of a bonus, I guess, that you get in there as well. And that's actually included with all of my courses. And some courses include things like live classes. Like I've got the master class actually includes a live class every month. And my students love it. My students that are watching this video, I know some of you are, put in the comments what you think about the live classes. I will put that out there. That's how confident I am that my students are going to come through for me. So give the video give them a week and come back and look at the comments on that. But we had a lot of fun. We just had one this weekend and we went for almost 2 hours and talked about all sorts of stuff, but had a good time. And I go over artwork that people send, I do critiques, I take questions. Now that's only in the masterclass. So if you're looking at other courses, you know, that one, the masterclass, course 2 is what it's called, is includes that. But this course, even this course, this rendering course, is going to include, you know, the discussion board. You know, you can get critiques that way. And I'm actually experimenting a little bit with a different platform this time also, which is Skillshare. So some of you guys that you might already be members of Skillshare, it's a big like marketplace of courses. It's massive. There's thousands and thousands of courses. And I've got some of my courses on there. I've got this one, and I've got 2 of my Procreate courses on there. But the cool thing about that is you have one flat fee, and then you have access to all the courses. Like, you can get them all. And there's a link in the description that if you sign up to Skillshare through that link, you'll actually get 2 months for free. So that's a thing that you can do. This video is getting long. Some of you guys have checked out and missed out on that deal. So yeah, you can sign up either way. You know, both ways support the channel and support what I'm doing, and I'll appreciate it either way. And it's kind of a way, I can't get a sponsor button on YouTube because I don't have enough subscribers. I think you have to have like 50,000 or 100,000. I'm like years away from that at this stage. So if you do want to support the channel, this is a way to do it. And so thank you guys for watching. I know this video has probably rambled on a little bit too long, but I appreciate the support. We've just crossed 28,000 subs. We'll be at 29 in maybe a month or so, and 2 or 3 months away from 30,000, which is that's a lot of people that want to watch coloring tutorials. I did not think you were out there, and not in these numbers anyway. All right, so yeah, comment if you have questions below. I'll be happy to answer there. I'll keep an eye on those, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Roll the fancy intro. Going out.